It was my birthday recently, and somebody in my extended circle of family gave me a gift of a 3-month subscription of a paper newspaper delivered to my door. And fortunately, as I found out, he hadn't paid for it yet. He hadn't purchased it yet. It was basically a voucher that he gave me, and he hasn't bought it yet because he didn't have my current address. And so I said, "Oh, please, that's great. You haven't bought it yet. Please don't buy it because it would go straight into the trash. I don't read the news. I actively shield myself from it as a recovering news junkie. I don't want to have anything to do with this. And receiving a newspaper in the mail would be horrible. It would be like giving an alcohol subscription to a recovering alcoholic. Not a good idea." And then what I faced was this kind of judgment and, oh my God, how can you not read the news? You're completely uninformed. You're not being a good citizen and so on. So I thought that I'm going to do a video on this topic. And if you are like me, if you're trying to build your business to $1 million in revenue, it is a really bad idea to be watching the news. And I want to make my case for it so that you kind of change your perspective and stop watching the news and consume anything political. So that's one thing. Second, in case you are on my side already, you need some arguments. But when you're dealing with your family or circle of friends or anybody else in your circle who is judging you for not reading the news, for not being informed, for not knowing what's happening in the world, that I want to give you. So I have 4 reasons why you should stop watching the news and 4 counter arguments to points that people will throw at you as they judge you. Not that it really matters. We shouldn't really care when people judge us, but it is useful so that you are calm when these things get thrown at you, and you don't even have to argue with them. It's just good to have these ideas and these thoughts in your head so that when this stuff comes, you can be calm and you don't get sucked into having an argument. So first of all, the 4 reasons why you shouldn't be watching the news. The first reason is very obvious. It is wasted time. Every minute that you are watching the news or consuming anything political, you are not working on your business, which is if you're trying to build a business as a solopreneur to $1 million in revenue, you need every single ounce of mental energy to dedicate to that alone. Now, of course, you can say, well, but I also need some downtime. I need to recover. I need to take a break. That's, of course, you should take a break, but have these breaks to be very deliberate, very intentional, that you recover, you sit down, you close your eyes, you breathe, you kind of meditate a little bit, or anything like that. Even if you just go for a short walk, or even if you just open a book and read a Shakespeare sonnet, that is going to do more for your personal well-being, for your mental health, than reading the news. Okay, but that is point number 1, is wasted time. If you really added up all those little breaks during the day that you just go and browse to a news site, all of that is taking time away from your business, and not on something uplifting, but on something negative. And here comes the second point. Of course, the news are distilled negativity. Anything that has happened in the world that is bad gets delivered into your brain. That is just not good. Obviously, it's like the opposite of good. It's bad. It's negative stuff being digested and condensed and like piped into your brain. Why would you do this to yourself? It is anxiety inducing to hear about some kind of disasters, to be informed of the minutiae of whatever it is. I do know that there's a presidential election going on in the US, right? So I know that, the Republican candidates are now forming and all of that. All of this is either useless or downright damaging information. Perfect example. Recently, we're with family, and one of them told me about some horrible story somewhere where a child burned to death. Okay, some kind of horrible news event. And I'm like thinking, bless that child's soul. I'm grieving for his parents, but why do I need to hear about this? Why do I need to know? I don't want to know about this, right? There's disasters happening all the time in the world, and I am not serving anyone if I just know about it and think, oh my God, how terrible. I don't serve them. I don't serve the loved ones of this person who tragically died. The best way I can actually serve them is to build a big business, because building a big business means that I give people work, that I pay taxes, and somehow this will all trickle down to the person in question somehow, even if completely indirectly. So there is really no value in me knowing about some kind of disaster that befell someone. So that's kind of the second reason. It is condensed negativity, but also, and that's like kind of reason 2B, condensed negativity is 2A, and this one is 2B, and that is it occupies your mind. It is mental clutter. If you were to spend your downtime by reading a Shakespeare sonnet, or by going for a walk, or by watching a movie, even a movie is better, because a movie will probably not occupy you for hours at a time later on. If you are immersed in the news, and especially in politics, and you have people in your social circle who you disagree with, you will in your mind be playing out fake discussions. Oh, this person said this, then I would say this. And you hear something about whatever, Trump. Okay. And then you think, oh, this person hates Trump, and this is what they would say, and this is what I would say. And so all of this stuff is such a waste of mental bandwidth. And it plays out at a subconscious level. You kind of think about it as you read some kind of piece in the news, some politician, Biden did something shitty. And so now you're thinking about it, and this is what you would say if this person, if you like Biden, if you don't like Biden, you would be. All of this is just mental clutter that is going to distract you from what you need to be doing. Reason number 3 why you shouldn't be watching the news is you are being part of somebody else's plan. News is a business. The news company is the seller. The advertiser is the buyer. What is the product? Your attention. And how is that product manufactured? What is the raw material for it? Stories about the world, but stories about the world phrased and filtered through a lens to keep you watching. So there's, first of all, the choice of topics that comes from that, pure negativity, only mostly negative things, wars, famine, diseases, accidents, that kind of stuff. That's one aspect of it. And the second thing is it is presented in a biased way that reflects the worldview of the people in question. So you're not even receiving about the facts that happen in the world. You're not receiving an objective view. You're receiving a filtered view, which is engineered towards keeping you hooked so that you keep coming back. And the selection of topics, as I said, is negative. And so the primary motivation of the news company, whose not customer you are, whose product provider, whose source of value you are, they use you as a value to sell to the advertiser. And that relationship is not marked by objectivity and wanting to inform you. This is not their priority. Their priority is not to inform you. Their priority is to make money off of you. And so they will present you the facts in the way that will keep you hopefully hooked and coming back on a regular basis. They want to sell as many of your attention seconds as they possibly can. So think about it next time you are reading a headline or you are watching the news. This is what you are spending your attention. And attention is, these days, a very, very valuable resource, probably the most valuable resource. This is why people like Mr. Beast, who is, if you don't know, one of the most famous YouTubers in the world, has managed at age 24 to become practically a billionaire because he is so good at getting and keeping people's attention. Attention is a huge asset, and you are spending it on watching the news. And reason number 4 why you shouldn't be watching the news is a psychological effect. I read about it once. I was not able to find it anymore. So I call it the forgotten Wizard of Oz effect. As you know, in the Wizard of Oz, at some point, the curtain is being revealed, and there, one guy who's speaking into a microphone is revealed as playing the Wizard of Oz. And this is how I want to use the metaphor. When you are an expert in something and you read a news article about that topic, you will recognize how many mistakes they made. This always happens, right? Let's say you were at an event and then you see a journalist describing that event. You will always be able to say, no, this is wrong. This didn't happen. This is completely biased and so on. That kind of stuff. If you are an expert in a subject matter, for example, if a generalist journalist were to write about client acquisition on LinkedIn, I just know that I would be laughing at this, right? The way how they would describe it, they just don't know the terminology. They would be describing things wrong in a very naive and basic way. I would just see through that. And that is with everyone. If you are a tort lawyer and you read an article about tort law written by a journalist, well, they are not an expert and they are trying to also dumb it down for a general audience. So that's where you discover all those mistakes. So this is what we know. When it's our subject of expertise, we see right through those journalists. But we completely forgot about that. This is why I call it the forgotten Wizard of Oz effect. We forget about this fact that these journalists generally don't know very much, that is very superficial, and they have to write about all kinds of topics that they know very little about. When we read about something that is not in our domain of expertise, we just tend to believe them. although we know that they know so little when it comes to our matter of expertise, we forget that in all other areas of expertise, they're also not very good. So not only is the news biased and filtered for negativity, it is also very often very inaccurate because these people who are writing and creating the news don't know very much themselves. So if you yourself are still watching the news, I hope that these 4 points are kind of awakening something in you, that you reconsider and completely go cold turkey on it. This is what I've done, and it has served me really well. I still have the occasional relapse, but I'm way better than I used to be. But what happens if you are in your social circles, especially family, if you go back home from Thanksgiving on Christmas, and they will start to scold you? How can you not read the news, right? Throwing this peer pressure on you. You can just sort of brush it off. That's the Zen mode, okay? But if you don't have the ammunition in your mind, you might fall into the trap of trying to argue and trying to be right and all of that. Don't. Just brush it off, ideally. But these are the points that I would come up in my mind to when people throw these things at me. So the first thing that people will throw at you is that if you're not well informed, what kind of well-rounded person are you? You don't know what's happening. It's really ignorant. So whoever tells you this, how much of a well-rounded person are they? Do they have great physical endurance? Have they written a book? Can they kill, gut, dress an animal for consumption? Can they tell trees apart? Do they know how to find water in nature? Can they build a chair? When was the last time they went for a week without using their phone? People who don't have good responses to these topics are not well-rounded themselves. So when they blame you that you're not a well-rounded person if you don't read the news, is that really pot calling the kettle black, and you can dismiss that. And one thing that my family member threw at me was, you're just not taking impulses from the outside. You're just stewing in your own juices. To this, the point is, look, there is such a huge volume of classic literature, art, music, that even if you only dedicated all your time to consuming that, you would not even be able to consume 1% of it. And so you're trying to tell me that I've only read a couple of Shakespeare plays, for example. You think that I would not be served better by reading the remaining Shakespeare plays? For example, I haven't read Tolstoy. I haven't read anything of Tolstoy. And I guess I should. Wouldn't that be much better reading of a towering giant of world literature instead of some 25-year-old journalist who was being sent on to report on some kind of minor political skirmish? Wouldn't that be better to read from somebody whose work has lasted over a century? Life is short, and I'm not going to be able to consume even a small percentage of all the great literature. Wouldn't it be much better to take impulses from the greats in world history? Next thing that people might throw at you is, well, if you're not informed, you're going to be at the mercy of politicians. How can you be a responsible citizen if you're not informed about the issues and then you go vote? To this, my response is the vast majority of voters don't switch sides, right? They are basically voting for the same party forever. Maybe at some point they switch if they're really interested, but most people don't, especially if you're a values-based voter. And if you spend dozens and dozens of hours of watching the news and letting journalists to inform your worldview, then you're still going to be casting a vote if you just voted based on your values. For example, if you're a right-winger in your political persuasions, you maybe have one or two parties to vote between. If you're an American, you basically have one party to vote for. Similar if you're a left-winger, right? You have two choices in the United States. In Europe, where usually we have a multi-party system, there's maybe one or two parties that you could vote for. And so if you actually spend researching and watching the news, you would only be voting between one or two parties anyway. So what difference does it make? This is not your work. This is not your main line of business. So why would you spend more time on it, researching something that then you will cast a vote on anyway? One of my favorite arguments is, why can't you be more normal? Why do you always have to be so outlandish? It's one of my favorite arguments, and I keep hearing this from my extended family. And to which I say, look, you know what is normal? Especially in Austria, household income of 55,000 euros a year. That is normal. And I don't want to be normal in this way. And I really believe that if you are trying to build something big, if you want to build $1 million business, then you have to throw everything on the fire that you can. And politics and news should be one of the first things that goes. I hope this was useful. I'll see you in the next video.